Hello everybody, welcome to Monday, the working week, back to the working week, but who's really working? Is everybody working at home? I guess so. There are more people in the New York City subway. That's slowly picking up. For most of the past year, subway's been pretty much empty, whether you went at 9:30 or if you went at 5:30, and even when I get to Penn Station at those times of day, it's empty. So anyway, maybe things are getting back on track here slowly. But I wanted to make a kind of a response video to my good buddy Daniel Van Elsch, who's made a three-part series about the great jazz guitarists. He has, Daniel has so many incredible records, such a wide span of records across all the different labels, catalogs. It's pretty daunting, and he has more knowledge of some of these players than I do back in the past. I know the guys who I really dig, and we sort of dig the same people up to a certain point. I mean, I love Wes Montgomery, and I love Johnny Smith. I love Freddie Green. I love Barney Kessel in the right situation. I even like Herb Ellis in the right situation. Some of these guys, there's a dividing line where their tone, you have somebody like a Johnny Smith whose tone is so beautiful and so full and so round, anything he plays is just astonishing. He never crosses over into that thing, maybe it's a West Coast thing, where the playing and the notes the guys are playing can be a little, their direction can be a little sterile, a little bit corny sometimes. I love Barney Kessel on the Pole Winners records. I've got his first record on Contemporary. He's wonderful on that. But sometimes it's like music for a hoedown. It doesn't always hit me here or here. And Herb Ellis is a more extreme example of that. Then you have someone like Joe Pass, who I think is closer to Johnny Smith. Just an incredible sound, just like, wow, listen to that tone and how rich he played and his technique and the beauty. You could hear, you don't even need a band, you just hear those guys play, Johnny Smith and Joe Pass. And then you go farther back, I love Charlie Christian. There was a great box set CD that came out many years ago, 10 years ago now, on Charlie Christian. They cleaned it up with, I think, the cedar processing, and it sounded, he was so funky and strong and swung so hard. He's the first jazz guitarist, I do believe. And all the guitar players and Count Basie's band, Freddie Green, those guys also had so much rhythms. He and Joe Jones, I forgot who the bass player is in that situation. Those guys swung so hard, and their role was purely to keep time. Then coming up to the 60s, so many great guitar players, Wes Montgomery, all the people Daniel mentions in his videos. But where I disagree with him and other people who seem to believe that jazz stops in 1970, I don't believe that at all. Jazz guitar in particular has evolved very, very quickly, as has jazz drumming. Most prominent guitarists would cite Pat Metheny, John Scofield, and Bill Frisell as the reigning guitar gods of the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, until people like Ben Monder came along. But I love all three of those guys. And if you don't, I also love Jim Hall. Some people think Jim Hall can't play, which is like, ask Sonny Rollins if Jim Hall can't play. He's on the bridge. Ask Jimmy Jufrey. He's on a few of his records. Jim Hall is a very refined player, beautiful tone, very articulate, very lyrical, very hard swinger, but refined. He's not Grant Green. And I understand why people love Grant Green. He's very funky, he's very bluesy. He sounds great on other people's records. I don't like his records. I don't own one Grant Green record. I Want to Hold Your Hand, what is it? Green Street? I don't know. I just don't care. I think he's kind of primitive and crude. But I can understand he does have a great tone, and the way he picks his attack on the string is very unique and very powerful. And that's why he's on so many Blue Note records. I love him on the Hank Mobley records. He's just pointed and moving. It's like you just get a tune, drop Grant Green in it, and he goes. But he lacks a lot of things that make him a more developed player, like a Wes Montgomery, who invented chordal soloing and was just an effortless machine of swing and sophistication and beauty in the way he played. Wes Montgomery is sort of forgotten now. His records don't sell at the Jazz Record Center. It's really strange because these are landmark records in jazz, as much of a landmark as some of Bill Evans' records. But Pat Metheny. Some people think he's smooth jazz. Listen to the first 2 Pat Metheny records. There's no smooth jazz on there. He's like 19 years old. He was a phenomenon. The youngest person to ever be introduced, to be invited to teach at Berkeley after he blew everybody away in Missouri, where he grew up, and then went to Florida. And it's interesting, he's from Missouri, as is Charlie Hayden, one of his good buddies. To me it's interesting, they're in the middle of the country, kind of like the territory bands, and they have that feeling. But Metheny put out a couple of records, 3 actually, before he started the Pat Metheny group, which a lot of people think is smooth jazz. But Metheny is so much more than a guitarist. He's a great composer, he's a great arranger, he's a brilliant thinker. I've interviewed him many times. It's more than just listening to a jazz quartet or a quintet. You're listening to a large scale arrangement, and his solos through a lot of the Pat Metheny group records are burning. I defy anybody to listen to a solo like on Have You Heard and say that's not an absolutely burning jazz solo. The guy is a steamroller on jazz guitar. Beautiful sound, beautiful tone, very unique style. Influenced many people. For years you heard the Metheny influence directly on so many people. He's still the best-selling artist in jazz. I think he's one of the few jazz artists left who can sell out more than a club. He can sell out the Beacon here in New York, which people go, oh, that's not a big deal. Well, the Beacon is a lot bigger than any jazz club in this city. And he's, they were kind of rock stars in the 70s, and I still think those are great records. Metheny knows how to write a melody, which is why he's so popular. And writing great melodies evades many jazz musicians today. They don't write memorable melodies. That is Pat Metheny's gift, beyond his ability to see very far. His latest album, From This Place, is kind of a culmination of all his records, I think, with Antonio Sanchez and Glimwin Silcock, I think his name is, and Linda O on bass. Very strong record, but it recalls all the Pat Metheny group records to me. And his next record, which comes out next month, is are pieces written for the LA Guitar Quartet, which they've asked him to do. And it has all the Pat Metheny trademarks. But Metheny swings incredibly hard. Listen to him on a Joshua Redman record. Listen to him on a Kong Vu record. Not only can he swing you into next week, as people say, he can play avant-garde. I'm not a big fan of his guitar synth things, but his acoustic guitar work is utterly beautiful. He's done, I believe, 2 acoustic guitar albums where he does Alfie and Anti-Lover and modern standards. And man, his version of Anti-Lover is incredible. I mean, he's an incredible acoustic guitarist. His touch, he knows how to get a great sound. All his records sound great. Bill Frisell, I think came right out of the Jim Hall school. Clean, refined, but then he got his own thing. And for me, if you really want to hear Bill Frisell, you listen to his records with Paul Motion and Joe Lovano. Those are, to me, that's the state-of-the-art trio jazz. To me, nothing has really moved past that. Because not only are they swinging, they're playing free to a degree, because Paul Motion is such a master. When I interviewed him once, he said, he left Bill Evans because he'd done that. He was ready to go forward. So he went with Paul Bley, who's another widely underappreciated piano player. He's more than a piano player. But and Motion is such a forward thinker. And with Lovano and Frisell, they don't need a bass. They just create worlds, man. All those records they did on ECM are just incredible recordings. And to me, nothing sits still. I mean, there are guys today like Julian Lodge who play perfect, pristine, old school guitar. Mary Halvorson can play the most avant-garde, crazy sounds, then turn around and play the most beautiful tone on her big electric hollow body you've ever heard. And her hero is Johnny Smith. But Bill Frisell just created all these alternate worlds with them. I'm not a fan of Bill Frisell's non-such records. They're very Americana. They just don't quite do it for me, even though I've seen him live, and he's astounding. He just sort of creates these whole worlds of atmosphere and reverb and beautiful melodies and repeating sounds, and it's always very heartfelt, as he is an extremely heartfelt person. But even his early records on ECM that are very hard to find, In Line and Rambler, you're hearing a totally distinct, unique, original voice, which is very hard to find for any musician. John Scofield, if you listen to the early John Scofield trio records with Adam Nussbaum, they're just like New York bar guys. He's trying to find his voice, but they're swinging hard, and he's got this, he's definitely steeped in the blues. That's his whole bag. I think a lot of people resented him because he got so popular. He had the Fusion Band, which was a very innovative band. Dennis Chamber, his Dennis Chambers, his drummer, you know, might be one of the most influential drummers, period, right now, because the whole world of hip hop and gospel chops drumming is all taken from Dennis Chambers and a little Vinnie Colaiuta. You know, then Scofield's records. If you still think he can't swing, listen to the early '90s quartet with Joe Lovano again, and Bill Stewart on drums, and either Larry Grenadier, or I forgot the bass player who passed away, who was an incredible player. But those 4 or 5 records they did, you know, that's also sort of the return of straight ahead jazz to America. After the whole Young Lions thing, you have these guys from New York just playing their asses off. Joe Lovano, one of the great saxophonists, modern day saxophonists. But those records with Bill Stewart and Larry Grenadier, there is not a harder swinging rhythm section today. Bill Stewart, another innovator of the instrument. You know, you can hear a lot of Roy Haynes in Bill Stewart. And he has his language is very much contained, but what he does with that language is so incredible and so strong. Bill Stewart has what drummers call a very wide swing beat. It's just a big friggin' groove. John Scofield told me that unlike any other drummer he has worked with, and Scofield writes very unique tunes, he also knows how to write a melody. They're very catchy. He says Bill Stewart just knows how to make music out of his tunes. He comes up with parts and ideas no one else has. But I love Scofield. He's done a wide variety of records. You know, I didn't really care for that record Hudson with all the guys they did up in the Hudson Valley. You know, Dejanette and Larry Grenadier. I just thought that album was kind of stillborn. But I love the early quartet stuff in the 90s that I spoke of. I'm not a big fan of the jam band stuff he's done, but he's done such a wide array of records. He did a record with the Metropole Orchestra, which was beautiful. And those guys have influenced all the modern day players, such as Julian Lodge, Kurt Rosenwinkel, Mary Halvorson, Gilad Heckselman, Nerf Felder, and Ben Monder. Ben Monder picks up where Frisell left off. Gilad Heckselman is sort of out of the Metheny school. He's another guy who knows how to write a melody. A wonderful young New York-based player. He came to the store once, and sometimes when I'm in the store, depending on what's happening, I can be a kind of a prick. And I apologize for that. And I was not being nice to this guy who came in once, and I realized it was him. And I like kind of bowed down, because man, I apologize, because he's such an amazing musician. Heckselman can write a melody. He's a beautiful guitar player. His records are also very atmospheric. You know, jazz is not just dang, 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 dang all day long, every tune. It's not 1956. You know, would you want your children to get to a certain age and stop? Oh, my son's 20. Well, I guess he'll be 20 for the next 40 years of his life. I mean, you know, nothing stays the same. Everything moves. But all these players that I just mentioned are state-of-the-art jazz musicians. Mary Halvorson perhaps being the most forward-thinking, the most innovative, because not only is she a master of just pure tone and beautiful jazz guitar technique, a la anybody you care to mention, from Jim Hall to Barney Kessel to Johnny Smith. When she pulls up her effects pedals, man, it's a whole new planet. She did a cover of With a Little Help from My Friends on this Impulse record where they cover all the Sgt. Pepper stuff. And if you didn't know better, you would think it's a bunch of tape loops and it's been heavily edited and spiced up. No, it's entirely live. She has such a mastery of pedals, and it sounds like a whammy bar, but it's not. It's something else. And it's just, it took me a while to kind of get it at first, because she also has metal influences, very avant-garde. I mean, her heroes are the twin poles, Johnny Smith, Anthony Braxton. So you're getting like the past and the future all in one spot. She's one of the few modern jazz musicians I've heard that seems to have a vision and can write a melody, and then she has such a beautiful touch on the instrument. So anyway, that's my rant, and if you care to talk to me, you can email me at Blue Horizon Mains Noise Analyzer, and I'll be glad to answer all your questions.